This is Winnererremy Bay on Pittwater. Originally a mangrove and salt marsh swamp, the state government made an attempt to develop it for housing in the late 1960s. This failed, and the large area of land that had been reclaimed by dredging became infested with noxious weeds. It was also polluted by marine contractors who dumped wharf piles, mooring blocks and building materials along its foreshore. Pittwater Council subsequently created the Winnererremy Bay Parklands and built a footbridge across Carl Creek to give pedestrian access to about 2 hectares of environmentally protected land on the Bayview side of the bay. This was declared a flora and fauna reserve and named Kooroowall, which is the local indigenous word for long-nosed bandicoot. The main entrance is located on Pittwater Road, where a broad concrete path leads to the bridge. This was one of the first areas cleared of weeds, and it was replanted with native trees, shrubs and climbers in 2003. A forest of swamp oaks had self-sown on the reclaimed lands, and large thickets of lantana had grown through the forest and around its perimeter. Asparagus fern also infested all areas, including the edges of the mangrove swamp. Other serious weeds included pampas grass, privet, African olive, balloon vine, Madeira vine, moth vine and blackberry. Clearing is done in a mosaic pattern so as to always keep some habitat for small birds and animals. It isn't until a cleared area has been replanted and the new plantings grown sufficient to offer effective cover that a fresh area can be cleared and the process repeated. Kooroowall's Bushcare Group works to maintain and continually improve the reserve by clearing established weeds such as lantana, managing blow-ends like moth vine and planting natives. Bandicoots, blue-tongued lizards, brush-tailed possums and ring-tailed possums all live in Kooroowall. Snakes, echidnas and quail are rare but have been sighted. Wallabies have been known to take daytime refuge in its thickets, and bush turkeys have returned and are breeding. There are many species of birds including blue wrens, silver eyes and thornbills. Walking dogs through the reserve is dependent on them being leashed and under firm control. A crushed sandstone path follows the shoreline northwards, with bridges over a creek lined with river mangroves. This is a nursery for fish, crabs and prawns, and home for some birds such as the nankeen heron and the bittern. Today, salt marsh can only be found at a few locations in Pittwater. Once widespread, salt marsh communities have been severely degraded by urban development and careless foot traffic. Rescue of the Kooroowall salt marsh required complete excavation, removal of weeds and turf and replanting. Fences also had to be erected to manage inappropriate access. Casuarinas don't mind wet feet and they tolerate salt water too, making them the perfect companion for salt marsh. It's an important consideration in low-lying areas that are subject to saltwater intrusion during extreme weather events. Salt marsh plays many roles in keeping the coastal ecosystem healthy, including erosion protection along the shoreline and water quality improvement. People walk the sandstone pathway daily with their dogs. Inevitably, shoes and paws carry seeds, so new infestations of soft weeds are constantly appearing. Rather than spray glyphosate to kill them, we have planted native ground cover species like this plectranthus so as to fill the edges of the pathway with desirable natives and exclude the weeds. Pelargoniums are also excellent for this purpose, as is cranesbill and dichondra and native violet. Late summer and autumn mornings sometimes coat spider webs with a heavy dew that catches the early light. The salt marsh is mainly vegetated with coastal wattle and is sedged with globular reddish-brown seed heads. At the northern end of the reserve, there's an area of comparatively rich soil. Originally thick with noxious weeds, it was cleared and replanted with native species in July 2007. 4 years later, it offers dense habitat to all manner of creatures.
There's some beautiful clematis here. It blooms in September, but it doesn't last all that long, like all beautiful vines. This area was regenerated about 4 years ago. First it was cleared and the lantana was taken out and piled up in these piles, which are left as habitat for birds and animals. When we build these piles of broken lantana, we try to make sure there aren't any weeds left underneath, because it's difficult to remove them later. However, these piles are a good place to plant running postman, because it's so vigorous it can overwhelm many shrubs. Its flowers are simply gorgeous. There's the native pandaria vine that we planted in here, and this is the first time I've seen it flowering. Now, this is a plant that came here by itself. It's the kangaroo apple, and it's one of the Solanum family, and it has these purple flowers and small berries which become much larger and bright orange coloured. The plant is called the kangaroo apple because the leaves resemble the footprint of a kangaroo. This is one of our beautiful native vines, and when it's a drought year, very dry, we rarely see much of it, but the last couple of years have been wet and this vine has thrived. It's going up all the trees. It's called snake vine, and the way you identify it is that the stem comes off the middle of the plant and not on the edge of the leaf. Oh, beautiful catospa in full flower there, just a little one. And here is our slender grape. That's a wonderful native vine that gets blackberries and feeds the beautiful day-night butterflies grub. The soil in the forest is really just a salty sand with little nutrient. This is native spinach, also known as warrigal greens. It loves it here and thrives in sun or shade. It's an edible plant, once fashionable in Europe where it was known as summer spinach. I'm just weeding as I walk through the forest, all sorts of things, bit of fleabane. The heartia is just endless. It keeps coming up here, and it seeds when it's quite little. And some moth vine, our old enemy. Berry bush with berries, which we bag. Oh, a corky passion fruit. We're getting a lot of this lately. They've got all these vines up at the golf course and the school. Looks just like ivy, and it gets a hard little black berry on it, and the birds spread it, of course. Oh, another moth vine, and here's a cassia. It's important to get the whole root out. This is a first in the forest. This is that nasty clumpy South African grass from the dog park. got very extensive, tough roots. Right here is a lovely plant, a little tree that self-seeds itself, where it's very difficult in the casuarina forest to grow anything much at all, and that's the brainia. Brainia is sometimes mistaken for cassia, but in brainia the leaves are alternate rather than opposite, and small berries are produced rather than pods. This hakea is on the Pittwater Road footpath. I love walking through this dense cover of blady grass, and further on there's Dianella with these beautiful berries. These were some of our first plantings and they've thickened up really well. Underfoot there's Dichondra and also basket grass. This kangaroo vine on the creek bank was also a first. It's an extremely vigorous climber that runs up trees to create dense thickets that protect our native birds and animals. And here's a golden orb spider. Having lunch. The nymph of the spittlebug creates a white, frothy secretion to protect it from dehydration and from parasites and predators. In fact, when you look closely, all sorts of things are going on, like these fungi, which break down dead organic matter to become food for surrounding plants. In autumn, the parts we see are the strange and beautiful fruiting bodies releasing their spores. Up in the trees there's a species of mistletoe that mimics the needles of the casuarina tree. When the fruits ripen in August, they bring the mistletoe bird. He's a handsome little fellow that sometimes builds a nest in the salt marsh. This lovely Pittosporum is a great self-seeder. It's flowered profusely this year, and in autumn we'll have beautiful yellow seed pods that split open to show bright red berries. Nearby, high in the casuarinas, are these beautiful rat's tails orchids. They flower in August and are slowly spreading into the forest. Another reason to treasure our casuarinas.